Everyone wants to know what would make them happy. What kind of job would make them happy, would make them fulfilled? What is their passion? In fact, one of the things that people will tell you, and I think it's bad advice, I used to think it's good advice, but people will say, do whatever you're passionate about, and eventually the money will come. And then I heard one of my favorite human beings on earth say something that I think is incredibly profound and very accurate as well. And it has been proven in my life over and over and over again. And that is, if you do it for the money, you're only going to go so far. And the person I'm talking about is Jerry Seinfeld. So he was on Howard Stern one time, and he was talking about how he was offered $110 million. Actually, he said he could have got more than that, but the published price was $110 million for him to do another episode of Seinfeld. And Jerry goes on to tell Howard how he had established such an incredible relationship with the audience that, as he described it, it was white hot. It was just so intense. And I know I was in that relationship. I was on the other side of that relationship with Seinfeld, and anything to jeopardize that was not worth any dollar amount you could put on it for Jerry. And that was easy to say at the time because, I mean, by then, Jerry's got all the money he'll ever need and then some. I think it was like the year or two after he quit the show, or the show went off the air, just his residuals alone were like $250 million. It was insane. And Jerry Seinfeld is close to a billionaire, as is Larry David at this point. So it's really easy whenever you know not only are you already making a lot of money, you've got all the money you'll ever need, and by the way, whenever your show goes into syndication, you're going to make a ton more for years and years to come. But I remember him saying to Katie Couric in an interview that I tried to pull up. I wanted to play the clip of it, but I cannot find it anywhere. But I know I didn't make it up. I didn't dream it up. He was having an interview with her right before the show was about to air its final episode. And I remember it because this was a big deal for me. My very favorite show of all time was about to leave the air. And he's talking to Katie Couric, and he said, I don't need any more money, because she was talking to him about, the same thing. How are you walking away from all this money? He said, all I ever wanted to do was get paid to do comedy. And I've been doing that since I was selling umbrellas on the streets of New York during the day and playing clubs at night. And I think Jerry Seinfeld's a guy that's absolutely true. Some people, again, it's easy to say that when you've got all the money in the world, but I think that's kind of his deal. It was never about the money. And here is a story about Jerry Seinfeld that I think really proves that it wasn't about the money. He had kind of made it in New York and was a regular at Gotham Comedy Club and some others that were there in New York, and decided that if he was really going to make it big, and potentially, I don't know if he was even thinking about getting a show at the time, but just if he really wanted to make it big as a comedian, he'd have to go out to the West Coast. And so he goes out to California, and he's playing all the clubs. But there's one, I believe it's the Comedy Store, which is Mitzi Shore's club. I think she's since passed. That's Pauly Shore's mom. That was one that he had been signing up over and over and over to do an open mic. And he was never getting chosen. They would never call Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, this is so crazy to think about. They would never call Jerry Seinfeld up to do an open mic. And he wasn't a newbie. He had been killing it on the East Coast, come to the West Coast, not exactly a completely unknown guy, and he can't even get up to do an open mic at Mitzi Shore's Comedy Club. So finally, Jerry, he goes back and meets with Mitzi Shore one-on-one, and he says, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm going to be here every night for open mic, and if you ever have a cancellation or if you ever have a hole to fill, I would really be grateful to be able to do it. I'm here. I'll do it. And Mitzi Shore says, you will never perform in this club. I don't like your comedy. Something to that effect. She basically just said, you suck. And you're never going to perform in my club. So Jerry Seinfeld has a choice to make at this point. What's he going to do? And by the way, incidentally, side note, a little bit of comedic history. To this day, Jerry Seinfeld, arguably one of the single greatest comedians of all time, has never played that club. And he had a decision to make. He was at a crossroads, and here's what he decided to do. When Mitzi Shore told him he would never play in her club, he determined that day, from that day forward, he would sit down for no less than 1 hour and write. He didn't care if he wrote one word or 1,000 words. He would sit down and not leave his seat for an hour. And to this day, Jerry Seinfeld practices the exact same discipline. Every day, what he says, ask in the chair for an hour, whether he writes one word or 1,000, he's in the chair. He was determined to do that. And so Mitzi Shore telling him he would never play in her club drove him to become one of the greatest comedians of all time. Now, you have to ask yourself, if he were just in it for the money, if Jerry was just wanting to try to be rich and famous as a comedian, would he have practiced the same discipline? And I think that the answer to that is an unequivocal no. As a matter of fact, Scott Galloway wrote a book called The Algebra of Happiness, and he said something to the effect that doing a job you hate, no matter how, or doing a job you love, but being constricted on the time you do it, can feel like a job you hate. So you might be doing the job that you really want to do, but if you're not doing it on your terms, it can feel like drudgery and a job that you can't stand. By the same token, if you're doing something you just for the money, but you don't actually like it, then it's going to eventually, you're going to hit a wall and it's going to be miserable. I did this for years. I used to seek out jobs specifically for the way they affirmed me, if it seemed prestigious or made me feel good about myself, and then was there a big payday at the end of it if I were successful? It was never, would I do this? Were I getting paid or not? It wasn't until I was much older and, yes, had a little bit of money to be able to make some more freelance style decisions, but nevertheless able to decide to pursue things that money didn't matter, such as writing. I've written a couple of books that very few people have ever read and probably never will read. You have probably, if you're listening to this, the chances that you have not read my last book, The Stone Chiseler, is pretty darn good. But that's not why I did it. I wrote it because I wanted to tell a story. I wanted to practice my first act of fiction. I wanted to write my first fictitious story, and it was fun. I mean, it was hard work. Obviously, writing a book is hard, and going through the editing process and getting it published and all that, it's hard. But it was never about the money. This podcast that I do, this is not about the money. I've said before that this is about building a birdhouse. You know, for me, I was listening to a podcast one time. I don't know who it was. I wish I knew who I could give credit for this because it stuck with me. It was someone talking about how we live in this world now of such subjectivity, right? Where you can go and if you're a college student, if you just write the essay that you think the professor wants to read, then you can score a good grade. But you may know in your heart of hearts that it's a load of crap, that the professor teaches from a point of their own ideology, or maybe they're just kind of a buffoon. They don't know all the answers, but you write the essay that they want to read, and so therefore you make a good grade. But is it really any good? We now have hiring practices in America in particular, well, actually all over the world now, all of Western civilization, where you hire people for reasons other than merit. And you know there's probably somebody better that could do a better job, but for reasons that have nothing to do with talent, skill, or anything like that, we hire other people. But if you go and build a birdhouse for yourself, just for yourself, you will know whether or not that birdhouse will or will not suck. You know. There's no professor. You're not building it to please anybody. You're not trying to build a birdhouse that abides by some sort of federally mandated quota. It's just you built the birdhouse, and it's either good or it's not, and you know intuitively which it is. And I think that's one of the things that you have to do is to find something that you like to do. I mean, if you don't like building birdhouses, don't build a freaking birdhouse. I wouldn't build a birdhouse. I don't have any desire to build a birdhouse, and I can tell you right now, my birdhouse would suck. But the birdhouse has become a metaphor for many of the things that I do. Trying to produce a podcast episode like this that will hopefully inspire and motivate people to focus on some sort of self-improvement like discipline or chasing something that's not just about the money or doing something that will inwardly reward you intellectually and stimulate you from a creative standpoint. That is my birdhouse. This right now you are watching or actually listening to, and hopefully if you're on YouTube, by the way, if you are listening to this and you like it, please click like or subscribe. Leave a comment. I would be so grateful. I wasn't planning on that segue, but it seemed to fit in there just real nicely. And if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify, please rank the show or rate the show, leave a comment, ask a question, and I would just be so grateful. But right now, you are receiving my Birdhouse. Now, you may say, Jason, this episode actually sucks. I don't like your voice. I don't like your cadence. I don't like your Vicky's Texas accent. And frankly, the topic's just kind of stupid. I understand. And I'm willing to put it out there for you to judge that. But as for me, what I'm doing, I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm creating something that did not exist before, and now it does. This is my metaphorical birdhouse. And my question to you is this. What is a birdhouse you could build? Have you always wanted to write something but never did because you thought, nobody's ever going to read my book? All right, well, let me tell you something. That is not a reason to not write your book. Go through the process. I'm in the middle right now. I just finished the first draft of a book that I've written that, once upon a time, I would have been hell-bent on making sure it got published. Now, frankly, I don't care if it doesn't. I may never even attempt to publish it because I've enjoyed the story. The story, I watched the story unfold in my head. I put it on paper. I created the characters. There's some surprises and some tragedy and some things in there that I enjoyed the story. And I would love for others to enjoy it as well, but they may or may not, and they may never get the opportunity. And the older I get, the more I realize that as selfish as that sounds, and I don't think it is, I think it's more of just this idea that not everything that we do has to be or should be for money or recognition from the outside world, from the matrix to respond positively, but instead is to feed our soul, to feed our mind, to feed that creative something in us that we just know that we kind of carry around that nobody knows. Like, I tell you, a lot of the things that I do now, like with health and wellness, okay? So I'm the co-founder of a company called Authentic Health Partners, where we create nutraceuticals and health products for people. And to get to the point where I wanted to actually start a company in the health and wellness space, the road to it was decades of understanding human anatomy and the body and studying things like VO2 max and mitochondria, all the crap that in biology I knew nothing about when I was a kid and didn't like learning. But then whenever I started getting older and into health and wellness and wanted to live longer and live healthier and be happier and be clear-headed and be able to be, have strong cognitive health and cardiovascular health, then I started going around and I had all of this knowledge in my head rattling around that I could be talking to someone who was bragging about their latest toy that they had bought or some just typical, bauble that the Matrix places value on, and thinking to myself, yeah, but how's your VO2 max? As silly as that sounds. But it made me feel good and not from a haughty standpoint or thinking I felt that I was better than the person, but what it did was it caused me to start measuring my own self-worth in a completely different way, according to a different metrics than the outside world probably judged me. And then whenever I started valuing these things that were happening internally based on knowledge, health, and peace, contentment, cherishing small things in life that may not even have a price tag or be worthy of a price tag, but were so meaningful to me, like a cup of coffee with Gemmelin or something, or sitting on our back porch every single morning that, there's no value to that. You can't sell tickets to that. But I have such great joy doing those things. When that started happening, then all of a sudden my joy and the things that I started to do and do to this day for true meaning, they're much more inward. And all of that just really, whenever I was reading this book, I was reading about Jerry Seinfeld in this book, Originals by Adam Grant. There's a little segment how Seinfeld nearly didn't get made. And that caused me to start doing a little bit more research on Jerry, and back whenever he was about to end the show and all the money that was being thrown around. And then I was watching an interview with him and Howard Stern, and how he started talking about how if you just do something for the money, you can go far. I mean, there are some people that make a ton of money and have a good life and they're only in it for the money, but you're only going to go so far. You would not become Jerry Seinfeld, the billionaire comedian, if you had just done it for the money, because you'd make decisions that were purely money based. For example, and I go back to when he ended the show, because it was never about the money. If he were just in it to see how rich he could get, he probably would have done another season and got the $110+ million, right? And then possibly ruined his relationship with people like me who adored the show, because it would have just gone too long. It would have become stale. But he didn't do that. He realized there was something more important than the money. It was the integrity of the show and the integrity of the relationship he had with the audience. And there's just something to that I think is so cool, so profound. And I don't have the answer today. I don't have a lot of answers, but I don't know what it is that possibly you could do to start to kind of step out of the matrix and step within yourself to start pursuing something that's not about the money. It's not about recognition, but is more about personal contentment, stimulation, self-growth. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's reading some good books. Maybe it's listening to good music. Maybe it's just taking long walks. Maybe it's writing a poem. Maybe it is learning to play the guitar. Maybe it's, you know how to play the guitar. You know how to sing. You've been singing in your church for years and years, and it's recording a song and putting it out on iTunes. You can do that. You know that just like you can produce your own podcast like I'm doing right now, any of you listening to this, you can do that. It's not that complicated, or I wouldn't be able to do it. You can do the same thing with iTunes. You can record songs and put them out there. These platforms that we have available now are so amazing. Did you know that you could go create a small independent film and pay a little bit of money? I don't know how much it costs. I could look it up. And you can have a movie on Prime. That's right. People could go watch your movie on Prime. So are you someone who's wanted to create a film? Right? Do it. And who the hell cares if nobody ever freaking downloads your movie on Prime? You will. I guarantee you would do it. What about stand-up? What if you're somebody like Seinfeld and everyone has always told you you should try to get up on stage. You should go do an open mic. Or no one's ever told you that, but there's something in you that you know. If you can start to do it and not care about making money at it, not worrying about whether you bomb or you kill, but the goal is for you to scratch the itch. The goal is for you to go to your old age never having the regret of not trying and finding out, then I think you're going to lead a much richer and regretless life. And that's where I want to wrap this up. When you take the money out of the equation, when you take the glory and the recognition out of the equation, and you start doing things for the sake of pursuing this life as a journey and an adventure, then what you start to do is you start to eliminate little by little regrets that you might have waiting for you at the end of your life. Every survey that's ever been done, there's actually one called, there's a big global regret survey that's out there. And inevitably, the things that rank highest on the regret list are things that people didn't do, not the things they did. They even rank higher than bad relationship decisions that might have destroyed families. Still, the top regrets that people have as they get older are the things they did not do, not the things that they did do. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There is no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. It's not there. What happens is life is like walking along the rainbow and picking up pieces of gold, ergo experiences, memories, picking them up along the way and putting them in your own pot so that one day, should you and I be fortunate enough to live into a ripe old age, and we're sitting around because we can't get around as much, but we're sitting and we have this pot of golden memories that we picked up along the way that we collected and had a blast the whole time, that the actual reward, the financial, kind of the metaphorical reward, the fortune that we've accumulated is truly priceless. because it never was about the money. It was about the experience, doing things you love. And then, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to become a billionaire like Jerry Seinfeld or Larry David, crushing it in comedy or whatever it is that you choose. But the beauty is, if you're not making the big bucks doing the thing you love, it doesn't mean you're going to stop, because it's not about the money. You're doing it for a totally different set of reasons determined by you, not the outside world, not the matrix, but you. So I hope that you find something that you're willing to pursue just for the mere pleasure and joy of it. Make your life an adventure. I'm Jason, and I'm out.
Well, that does it for this episode of The Jason Wright Show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a Texas Titan Media production. Fourth Wall did the music. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Please consider going out to jasonwrightnow.com and signing up for the Vitruvian Letter. Also, please go out to iTunes. It takes like 30 seconds to just leave us a 5-star rating. It does wonders for the podcast. I would be so grateful. And with that, until we meet again, go crush it and endeavor to improve always in all ways. I'm out.